Um, so somebody asked me, and I don't want to, and I like the question because I think it gets to a good point. But I'm just saying I try very hard not to do personal beef stuff, so I'm going to avoid any personal beef stuff here. But somebody asked, how about Ryan Knight claiming to be a socialist, but only viewing something like the DSA through the lens of what they do through electoral politics? I think that that's a problem. And let me, instead of focusing on this person, thanks for the question, Ismail. Instead of focusing on this person, let me focus on why that's a mistake. So one, I would say that I think it's a misrepresentation of the DSA in general, to act like, the DSA is operating as some kind of organization that is just working to, increase the popularity of the brand of the Democratic Party. I think that somebody who thinks that actually has very limited experience with the DSA in like an actual organizing capacity in its actual structure. I mean that by talking to members, going to meetings, engaging with them politically. I think that that's a huge misrepresentation of that organization. Primarily what it's about is that there are some people who they make the correct analysis. The Democratic Party is a political party that functions to defang the working class movement. It functions to serve the interests of capital. That's why Jay Carney, Obama's former press secretary, is now on the front lines fighting against a labor organization in Alabama. Right, I'm talking about in Bessemer, Alabama, where people are fighting at that warehouse. They're fighting to form a union, and Jay Carney is on Twitter attacking Bernie Sanders, attacking the union, telling lies, saying all of this stuff to protect the profits of one of the largest corporations in the world that does some of the worst and most evil anti-worker policies out there. Right, that is somebody deeply rooted within the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is a wicked organization. We understand this history, right? And I think if you're a socialist, you understand that the Democratic Party is not a party of the working, that fights for the working class. And what's funny about people who like really fixate on that is like, that's like the first chapter of being an American socialist, is understanding that the Democratic Party is not your friend. Understanding that Barack Obama not only just didn't do the things that we wanted him to do, but from the get-go was always going to be opposed to any kind of structural change. Right? They functionally operate as a way to take people's frustration with the system and to translate that with maintaining the system. That's basic kind of like socialist understanding of American politics. What is funny to me is people not understanding the analysis, and I don't want to because like the DSA is a large organization, and there's a lot of different tendencies within it too, that I don't even want to endorse one side or the other on this, because I'm very much of the opinion that we need to be laying the groundwork for building a socialist political party. And I've done a lot of conversations about that, which you can watch, and I'll do more of them again in the future. But what's frustrating, so like there are members in the DSA who I have disagreements with on these kind of questions. But what's really frustrating is to have somebody misrepresent the DSA as an organization and act like they just sit around and tell their members, oh, vote Democrat. Yeah, these things are wrong, but vote Democrat all the time. DSA refused to endorse in this most recent election. More and more, the DSA is running in opposition to the Democratic Party. Now, there is a tactical decision with members of the DSA to run people on the Democratic Party ballot line, right? Because the way that the United States system is set up, these two parties control access to the ballot line. The Democratic Party doesn't operate like parties in the rest of the world, where to run on their ballot line, you have to really be involved with them or do much for them. You can just run in their primary, and the hope is that you can do that to prevent the kind of other argument that gets lobbed against socialists whenever they do run on a different ballot line, the Democratic Party, that they're wreckers. I think that we have to get over that, by the way, but that's a whole different conversation. I bring this up to say that walking around with this extremely bad faith criticism of the largest socialist organization in the United States, one that now is approaching numbers that we haven't seen since the heyday of the Communist Party organizing in the USA, right? With these extremely bad faith critiques, because you have the most basic Like the first level understanding of why the Democratic Party is evil is extremely unhelpful, right? Again, I preface this with talking about how evil the Democratic Party is and why it's a problem, right? But to sit here and act like people in the DSA aren't aware of this is a mistake. Now, look, I also think it's completely on board to criticize AOC. We were talking with Shama Sawant, and we're going to do some more conversations about this um, very soon. But after our interview with Shama Sawant, the first part of it is going to go up tomorrow. But I was talking with her a little bit about some of these questions, and I don't want to to spoil anything, especially since that wasn't a recorded conversation. But we're going to have another one in the future, and I'll just say what I think about for example, somebody like AOC. There are issues that the DSA has and that have to be reckoned with. It's an organization that's had its membership shoot up to unprecedented numbers in the period of about 4 years. There are internal reforms that are going on. There are political struggles within it, and AOC is somebody who's difficult to deal with because you have somebody who's done a lot to popularize the idea of socialism in the United States and does a lot to fight for folks, but also I think has some serious limitations as a socialist leader and a socialist thinker, right? And a difficult aspect of the way that, because of the historical situation that we're in, difficult thing is that we put somebody like AOC into a position of power where she functionally has more power than the organizations that brought her into power. What I mean by that is like the DSA doesn't really have the ability to recall AOC and to make her hold a kind of party line because it wasn't set up to do that. So, these are some of these problems that we're having with members who are in government who we don't like everything that they do is somewhat a consequence of the success of the DSA. And the solution there is not to throw the project away, but to really dig your heels in and continue building the power of this important socialist organization, the USA. It's just absurd to me to not understand this at this point, especially if you're going to invoke people like Lenin, who was a very, very strong materialist, who had a very, very strong understanding of politics. Somebody who, for example, to talk about James Connolly, there was the Easter Uprising in Ireland, which was a movement against the UK crown, against the occupied government, in Ireland, that had some success, but eventually was quashed. And you had other members of the communist movement attacking this uprising because they basically were saying, oh, it wasn't socialist enough, it wasn't communist enough. And Lenin said, if you don't understand how important this movement was, then you have no conception of how social movements arise organically. And that's somebody, by the way, who then later led one of the most successful communist movements in history, right? That understood the moment of its time and took advantage of that to build some form of socialism. What I'm saying is, like, it's absurd to invoke Lenin in one sentence and then to miss what's happening in the United States because you want to have this extremely lazy party analysis. That is not Marxist analysis. It's not even socialist analysis. And to get back to what Ishmael was saying, they made this great point about talking about, oh man, I lost it now in the thread. I'm sorry, but they made this great point about talking about folks who mistake electoral politics for socialist politics. Again, I always think that this kind of hard line that some people make about electoral politics versus other kind of politics is unhelpful. But it is very funny to sit here and to talk about yourself as a socialist and then to spend all of your time talking about congressional party politics, because and people should read the James Connolly piece that I put in the chat earlier. If you can't find it, it's called Socialism Made Easy. In that, he has a really great conversation about the importance of organizing the working class on the economic level and on the political level. And he says that there is no difference between those two spheres. And he also makes this really great point. And let me see, I think I saved it here because it is a phenomenal line. I'm going to read this to y'all. And then I will, hold on, I don't want to lose it. It's a little bit of a long text here, but let me get it. He's talking here about how important it is to organize the working class, not just on the political sphere, so trying to get people to vote for left or potentially socialist candidates, but for getting the working class to be organized at the level of industry. And he actually goes beyond just saying, oh, we need a high unionization rate. He says that we need to have unions and a working class movement that understands itself across the board. What that means is that we're not just saying, okay, well, the truck drivers are unionized and they operate on a different level than the warehouse workers, right? He says you need to have a unity, a class unity between the working class across all sectors. You can't just have highly militant sections of the working class if you want to implement, a transition towards socialism. So he makes this point that if you're fixated only on party politics, then you are making a huge mistake. No matter how committed that you are to building socialist politics, you have to build class consciousness, and that comes through organization. And that organization has to be rooted in the working class, and to be rooted in the working class, that means it has to begin and start at the workplace, and then builds into the political realm. And before I read this, just one more reminder. This is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about the difference between class-focused politics, which is what a lot of socialist organizations do in this country, and that's a good thing. But what is much better is class-rooted politics. And here's why. This is from James Connolly, Socialism. Let me get the title right. Socialism Made Easy. It's a good title. So he's talking about Gompers in the United States. You don't need to know the history there, except to understand that, if you think that you can just build different union organizations that only organize people based on like one part of industry, and not build union organizations that organize the class as a whole, you're making a mistake. So he said, so Gompers, talking about the United States, failed, as even the socialists would fail if they remained equally blind to the natural law of our evolution into class consciousness. That natural law leads us as individuals to unite in our craft, as crafts to unite in our industry, as industries in our class. And the finished expression of that evolution is, we believe, the appearance of our class upon the political battleground with all the economic power behind it to enforce its mandates. Until that day dawns, our political parties of the working class are but propagandist agencies, John the Baptist of the new redemption. But when that day dawns, our political party will be armed with all the might of our class, will be revolutionary in fact as well as in thought. And what he's talking about right there is the difference between just having the political convictions, or even having people in elected office, and actually being able to say, we're here, we're in the government, we're fighting for this kind of reform, or we're fighting for this shift in the economy, right? And if you don't do it, we're going to shut down industry, right? Or, basically what socialist politicians today, they say, like, the working class will rise up against you. Well, there's a big difference between being able to use that as like a rhetorical message to our opponents, and to actually say, yeah, we're shutting this down. Because we not just have the support of the working class, but these political organizations that are in power and articulating these demands are part of that movement. And we have captured so well the working class. The working classes has class consciousness that can act in unison to flex its muscle, which is much more powerful than the capitalist class, but they have to keep us divided. If we're able to flex that muscle, we can make those rhetorical arguments that we make right now, which are at the end of the day just rhetoric and propaganda, into actuality. And that's what they're afraid of. And you need to understand that difference as a socialist to understand how we need to be building power if we actually want to make what we believe a reality. Because for some people, politics is an expression of their virtue and their convictions, and that's a good thing. It motivates a lot of people. But I'll tell you what, if you're somebody who, like me, understands what it's like to be hungry, understand what it's like to see people suffering all around you, and understands that it's because a few people exploit us and they've been exploiting us for centuries, then you will be a lot more serious about building politics that can not just have the right message and can look more virtuous than others, but that can actually put its ambitions into practice. Sorry, I get pissed because it's not, for some people, it really is an activity for them. It's something to express their feelings versus something that really, really matters. And I know a lot of people who listen to this, come and are, working class people, and they understand how important this is. It's not a joke. It's not something to build, a personal brand around yourself. It's very serious. And we have the ability to do it. But if we continue going down these making the same mistakes that we've been making for centuries now. It's not going to get any better.